Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sade and welcome to Sade's Mix, where on Sundays we talk about a little bit of everything. We do a little true crime stories. I throw in some vlogs in there for you, and of course we go through some of the hidden gems found right here in South Florida. And if any of that interests you, of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And if you haven't liked this video or any other video on my channel, you can go ahead and show the girl some love. I would absolutely appreciate that. Today we have a true crime story to go over. The last time we did a true crime video, it was a video about Susan Paul and her tragic disappearance, and very heavy story. If you guys haven't seen, of course, I will link it in the description box down below. But even to this day, the search for Susan is still ongoing. Today, I'm going to talk about a survival story about a young teenage girl who defied the odds and was able to capture her attacker not once, but twice. Yeah, this story has a lot, and I just want to kind of be upfront with you guys. Viewer discretion is absolutely advised. There's going to be talk about kidnapping, mayhem, and rape, unfortunately, and body mutilation. All terrible shit. I'm not going to, of course, go into full details, but unfortunately, a big part of the story I can't avoid. But if you need to exit, I 100% understand. Without further ado, let's get into Mary Vincent's story. It's September 29th of 1978. Mary Vincent is 15 years old and she's hitchhiking with two others from her home in Las Vegas, Nevada to her grandpa's house in Berkeley, California. Now, before anybody makes a face about hitchhiking, remember I said it's 1978, ain't no damn Ubers, and actually hitchhiking was considered a safe means of travel. I always say people born in the 60s are just like the bravest bunch of people. Like, they didn't give a shit about nothing. I know, right? It's just, anyway, doesn't matter. Mary was leaving because her home life was becoming very chaotic. Her parents were going through a divorce, and Mary, I think she was the oldest of 7 kids. She just wanted to find some peace and quiet, and she thought, what better way to start a new life than just leave this behind and go with her grandpa. She loved her grandpa. Mary was a competitive dancer, and she just dreamt of like performing and traveling the world, and she just took this opportunity as going and following her dream, like making it big, dancing on Broadway or whatever. So Mary and her 2 friends, they make their way to the highway, and Mary starts walking down the highway. She's just holding up a sign that simply says, heading south. Some time passes, a few cars pass them by, no one really stops, but eventually this white van does pull up. Inside of the van, there was like this middle-aged white man, and the stranger, he asks Mary like, hey, where are you going? Where are you headed? Maybe I can give you a ride. Mary tells him like, hey, I'm headed to Los Angeles, and would you be so kind to give me a ride there? The middle-aged man, he agrees. He says, yeah, no worries. I'm heading in that direction. You can tag along with me. Now, remember, Mary is traveling with 2 other people, and her companions were getting, like, bad vibes from this guy. They attempt to tell Mary, like, maybe you shouldn't get in this van. Like, we can always wait for another opportunity. They tried everything to kind of delay her from getting into this creeper guy's van. When Mary turns around to ask the stranger if her friends could come, she notices that like the van is relatively empty, so he really shouldn't have any issue with her friends coming. So she asks like, can my friends come with us on this trip as well? But the stranger, he says no because he doesn't have any space. But everybody was able to kind of peep into the van and see that he had space for the 3 of them to go with him. So her companions, they continue to try to convince her, like, please don't get in a car with him. Like, let's just wait for another car. It just doesn't make sense for us to separate. Just friends trying to plead with their friends. Like, this is not a good choice. But remember, Mary is 15 years old, and she just wants to get to her grandpa's house as soon as possible so she can start her new life. Mary felt comfortable enough that she would be safe with this man, so she proceeds to get in a car, and the 2 drive off in the direction of Los Angeles. Now, this stranger was Lawerence Singleton. Lawerence here, he had a lot of anger issues and he was a misogynist. If you don't know what that is, I'll put it down here. Yeah, he was one of these guys. And he was going through like a rough patch in his life. At the time of him meeting Mary, he had been divorced twice already, and he had a daughter from his first marriage who wanted nothing to do with him. Lawerence was in and out of jail for petty crimes, and it appeared that his anger was escalating over time. But Mary didn't know this. She just saw a man that resembled her grandpa that was willing to take her to where she needed to go. That was until Lawerence decided to smoke a cigar in the car. Now, as I mentioned, Mary felt safe because Lawerence gave her grandpa vibes, and she was like, okay. But then when he lit the cigarette, she started sneezing, and Lawerence decides that he's going to reach over to Mary, and he just starts to like fill up on her, like on her head, on her neck, on her back, and he's asking her like, are you sick? Are you unwell? And Mary's like, why is he touching me all over? So she basically slid as far away from him as she could, closest to the door, so that he would stop touching her. Even though Mary's thinking like, okay, that was a super weird situation, she eventually does calm down. She eventually dozes off. When Mary wakes up, she's like looking around and she realizes that they are way off course. They're actually heading back into Nirvana. Now Mary is freaking out. She's like panicking, she's freaking out, she doesn't know what to do. She sees a stick on like whatever, the floor or something. She picks it up and she points it at Lawerence and she starts screaming like, where are we going? You promised you was gonna take me to Los Angeles, like turn the car around, like what are you doing? Some sources say like Lawerence, he just like apologizes and he's like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, and he turns the car around, right? Other accounts say that like he tells her like, yeah, we are on the right road, like what are you worrying about, like sit down, we're going the right way. Whatever he said doesn't matter, right? Mary eventually does calm down, she sits back down, and they continue on the road trip. At some point, Lawerence stops because he needs to relieve himself, and at this time, Mary utilizes this time to stretch her legs and just like kind of catch her breath from like the chain of events that have happened. So Mary's like on the side of the van, she's stretching her legs, she looks down, she realizes that like her shoelace is untied, so she's like, okay, I'm gonna just bend over, and like I really should have my shoelace tied just in case I gotta like dip on it. So Mary, she's bent over, head down, tying her shoes. What Mary doesn't see is that Lawerence is creeping up behind her with a sledgehammer in hand. He is waiting for the perfect moment to strike Mary. He strikes her, she falls to the ground, he gets on top of her, and he basically beats her until she's unconscious. After he beats her, he drags her to the back of the van, puts her in the van, gets in the car, drives to the local canyon where he then proceeds to tie her hands and feet to the wall of the van. What he does to Mary is horrific and cruel. There's no other way to say. Probably those words don't even justify what he does to her. For the remainder of the night, she is SA'd by Lawerence continuously, repeatedly, brutally. At some point during the attack, he forces her to drink some concoction he made, and it forces her to pass out. When she wakes up, she realizes that it's morning time, and she starts to plead with Lawerence, like she won't tell the police, she won't go to the police, like just let her go. She's just trying to get to her grandpa's house. She doesn't mean any harm by him, she's just trying to get out of there by any means. And it's clear that Lawerence is getting annoyed by her begging and her pleading and her wanting to be set free. He tells her flat out, you want to be set free? I will set you free. At this point, Lawerence grabs Mary, he walks her to like the nearby road, he has her take a seat. It is believed that her hands are tied behind her back, so she's not able to escape, and he leaves her there and he walks back to his van. He's like rummaging through it, right? All the time she's like trying to see what he's doing. When he returns to her, he has a hatchet in his hand. He proceeds to grab Mary by the arm and he just cuts her arm off. While she is just in this undescribable pain, Lawerence then proceeds to grab her other arm and hacks that one off right below the elbow. Oh, but it doesn't end here. He then proceeds to push her down a 30-foot embankment and then proceeds to pick up her body and stuff her into one of those like concrete pipes that you sometimes see in like the movies that I didn't know were actually real. I just thought they were there. But yeah, he stuffs her in one of these concrete pipes, and before he like drives off, he turns to her and he says, "Now you can be free." And he just drives off. Like, that's some cold-hearted shit. Like, you just left this baby to bleed to death in the middle of nowhere. Mary, you know, she did not want to die. She now knew that her purpose in life was to make sure that this was never going to happen to anyone else. And she gathered what little bit of strength she had left, got herself out of that pipe, put mud on her arms, or what was left of her arms, and used whatever strength she had left to keep her arms up to prevent the bleeding and her muscles from coming out of her wounds. While in probably the worst pain of her life, Mary then proceeds to walk 3 miles to the highway. Mary's like walking on the highway and the first car that comes up sees her and they just sped off. They don't even try to stop. And I know that must have just been gut-wrenching for Mary to think that no one is going to stop with this naked, mutilated girl walking through the streets. But after a couple minutes, a couple drives by, they see Mary, they pull her into the car and they bring her to the hospital where she luckily survives. While at the hospital, Mary immediately provides a detailed description of Lawerence. Side by side, they look exactly the same. I'll put them up here. Like, she did that, right? And immediately, the police are on the hunt for this attacker. And it didn't take but a couple hours for people to start calling and say, yeah, I know this guy. It's Lawerence Singleton. Like, he's here. I'm not sure exactly the date of Lawerence's arrest, but what I do know is by the time he was arrested, Mary was provided prosthetic arms and she had to use a skin graft from her leg to pretty much repair her right arm, which basically ended her dancing career. But now she had a new purpose in life, and that purpose was to put Lawerence away. Mary had been through so much in the last 6 months, and she made it her mission that she was going to testify and stand up and address her attacker. And that's exactly what she did. She stood up, she pointed at Lawerence, she told the courts everything that happened that horrific night, while Lawerence was saying that Mary was a $10 whore and that she was a prostitute, trying to show that she was less than worthy of her life. In passing, Lawerence was able to get close enough to Mary and whisper to her, "I will finish the job no matter how long it takes me." He was convicted of rape, attempted murder, and tons of sex crimes against Mary. And you know, you're thinking like, okay, he's got a lot of charges, like he's going to be put away for some time, right? That's what I was thinking. However, due to lenient laws against sex crimes, Lawerence was only given 14 years because that was the maximum that anyone was able to receive at that time for sex crimes. Oh, and the kicker is it was 14 years with the possibility of parole. This man almost murdered this little girl, and you're giving him the possibility of parole and only 14 years. Can you imagine the thought of having to constantly live in fear and knowing that one day your attacker is going to be released and there's a possibility he could come back and finish what he started? You know, after the sentencing, she tried to move on and try to have some normalcy with her life, but she struggled. Of course, financially, it was impossible to find a job. She did sue Lawerence, but he didn't have any money, so it wasn't like she was going to get any compensation from him. And eventually, she just went into hiding. And after 8 years of being in prison, he was released. He was released. Even saying that, I stumbled over it. He was released because he was considered a model prisoner. A model prisoner. Those words should never go together. Like, it doesn't make any sense how whatever. This is just my personal opinion. But the public, they were outraged that the legal system allowed this man to be released on good behavior, and Lawerence stood by the fact that he did not hurt Mary and that it was someone else, that someone else had committed this crime. And multiple cities throughout the California area were refusing his residency because they did not want someone like him around them. And I do not blame them. Eventually, he does find residency in the city of San Quentin. He actually wound up staying at a trailer at the state prison. I know, like, you're not really free, but you're free. Ridiculous. By 1988, he is officially paroled. He is released. He has served his time. The very first thought that Lawerence has is that nobody here in California wants me, so I'm going to go back to my hometown of Florida. If anyone listens to the Breakfast Club in the morning, you know that they always say that the crazies come from two places, the Bronx and Florida. And honestly, there is no lie in that. So back in Florida, Lawerence is considered, like, you know, a pretty nice neighbor. He cooks for the neighborhood. He does, like, home repairs if anyone needs it, you know, like cutting the grass and stuff like that. But eventually, you know, Lawerence's facade breaks down and he starts having, you know, some of these erratic behaviors come up. He starts drinking, and there's even said that on one occasion he attempted to commit suicide. He left like a thank you letter to all the people who helped him during the time of the Mary Vincent situation, and he just wanted to find some peace. Of course, he was found in time. He made a full recovery, but that's when neighbors really started to notice that there was something that's not right with him. Then it happened. It was February of 1997. Lawerence had lured a sex worker to his home. Her name was Roxanne Hayes, and at the time, she was a mother of 3. Now, there are a lot of sources out there on who called 911. There's one source that says a local painter was on his way to make an estimate at Lawerence's house, and he just happened to see, like, the crime in action. A lot of neighbors said that they actually heard Roxanne's screams and they called 911. Regardless of the fact, 911 was called, and when the police arrived, Lawerence was completely covered in blood. So the police is like, what's going on here? And Lawerence just tells the police that he had cut himself. And the police are talking to Lawerence, and they kind of look over his shoulder, and unfortunately they see the body laying in his house, and it's the body of Roxanne. All of this could have been avoided had they had provided him with maybe a lengthier time, but because of the leniency on sex crimes, here we are. Because of Lawerence and the uproar from the public, the laws against sex crimes had been changed, and there were lengthier times provided for people who committed heinous crimes, but that still did not save Roxanne. And it almost feels like the legal system really punished the victims here. At some point, Lawerence admits to his crimes, and he says the reason why he did it is because Roxanne had threatened to cut off his head. So in self-defense, he attacked her, and he even admitted to be drinking or being drunk at the time and suffering from depression. None of that changes the fact that you murdered somebody. When news got back to Mary about what Lawerence had done, she wasted no time catching a flight from California to Florida in order to testify against him yet again, in order to be Roxanne's voice, because she knew that this was going to happen. And unlike California, Florida was actually seeking the death penalty. The trial, pretty straightforward. On April of 1998, he was sentenced to death. During the trial, he did get up and he did state that he did not commit the first crime, but he did do it this time. He would go on to die in prison in the 2001 at the age of 74. He had cancer. No one cares. Mary, she's 58. She is an artist. She's a victim advocate. She has 2 boys and she's been married. And, she was able to reclaim her identity and just kind of move on with her life. Her survival story is unlike many stories when it comes to true crime. What can we take away from this video? I mean, just be safe out there. This is a crazy world. We are in crazy times, and we really do have to look out for each other. If you've made it to the end of this video, thank you so much. I really love and appreciate you. Do something that is going to put a smile on your face, and I will be seeing you next Sunday. Bye.